He had taught us for so many years, and that's mostly what we learn in our university, that you have to spend money and have government regulations and all the policies that we have followed. Just think, Republicans were in charge, and what did we have? We had the Enron scandal and the breakdown and the bankruptcy, just a hint of what was to come. So people got panicky, and within weeks, month or so, we had a new bill, a Republican bill. It was called the Sarbanes-Oxley bill. More and more regulations. Like the reason somebody became fraudulent and overextended and borrowed and dealt in derivatives and had all this credit was because we didn't have enough regulations. Believe me, it's not the lack of regulations. It's the lack of regulations on certain people like the Federal Reserve and on Treasury and on Congress. That's what we need to regulate. You know, a lot of you, I imagine, have seen the British Scottish singer that came out this last week, Susan Boyle. That really fascinated me. Like I'm sure it fascinated a lot of other people, but I loved it. And I got to thinking about it, and this it may be a little bit of a stretch of an analogy, but you know, she knew that she was a good singer all her life. She had no doubts in her mind, even though she says, I've never had a chance to sing. And all of a sudden she had a chance to sing, and everybody who had her stereotype were shocked. And she has this beautiful voice, and now she's accepted. Sometimes I think about our freedom movement as being something like that. There's been a bunch of individuals. I have been a small part of that group for the past 30 or 40 years who have been speaking out. People who are trying to talk about this wonderful, beautiful thing that we have, and yet, how did they paint us? And how do we still receive it? You know, a little bit kooky. These are kooky people. I get it all the time. How did they treat me in the debates? But the ideas aren't kooky. The ideas are beautiful, and they're starting to be heard. We're starting to sing our songs, and believe me, they're starting to listen. Not because they want to concede anything to us, but they want to concede. They have to because they don't have any place to go. Because the other option is going to be so bad and so distasteful that we will have tyranny. We will have more government, and so far that's been the proposal. But believe me, the freedom movement is alive and well. I've been around the country. And the campuses are alive and well. And most of the people that are responding to much of what we've been saying have been the young people. There are a few that aren't quite so young, but they're young in spirit, and that's all that counts. And But it's this generation, it's this new generation that will make the difference. And they're in college now, they're in high school, and they're going to be dealing with jobs. And we have to ask the right question, get the right answers. It isn't as bad as what it was like when the Soviet system broke down. You'd think we'd have learned a little bit of a lesson from the Soviets. Remember, I think they went into Afghanistan. I think the British went into Afghanistan. And I think they've been going into Afghanistan for thousands of years and always losing. But it's so... But the Soviets, last hurrah was in Afghanistan. They went broke. This was predicted by Mises, the great Austrian economist. He says it wouldn't last. He predicted early on that socialism and communism couldn't work, and the reason is it destroys the pricing structure of money as well as all goods and services. So he knew the Soviet system would collapse. Now, the important thing about the collapse of the Soviet system is that we didn't have to fight them. You know, they did it to themselves. It was done within. And I remember the Cold War quite well. I was drafted in 1962 during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And yet we never had to fight, which is very fortunate because it could have ended up that way. But the system collapsed, but they're still having a lot of problems over there. But our traditions are so much better. We have the traditions of private property and contracts and sound money and individual liberty. So going back to our system is not going to be nearly as difficult. You know, the other day, some of you may have heard that our governor in Texas came out and said that still on the books there was this principle that states had the right to secede, at least Texas. And he received a lot of grief over that, and I received a lot of phone calls. What do you think about that? And I said, well, you know, I think the principle of secession is not all that bad. I think that's how our... It seems that, if I remember my history correctly, I think that's the way America came into existence. But that doesn't mean, to defend the principle of secession doesn't mean you have to defend secession, because I don't know of anybody right now that that's their key agenda. But the principle is important. Just think if that principle had existed past the Civil War. That means the feds would have always been on their toes not to overdo it, not overtax and overregulate and control the states. But that was, of course, eliminated in the Civil War. But, you know, we have since then praised secession. Have we condemned the seceding of all those republics around the Soviets, around Russia? No, we were delighted. We encourage it. Sometimes our CIA actually goes in and helps them secede. So this idea that we are automatically obligated to stay forever is a rejection of the ideas of free choice. In the early years, it was never thought that it was illegal to secede. That was it was understood that way. And the New Englanders, they didn't like the South. They wanted to secede from the South, and the South was more dominant. So they debated it. It was never argued that it was unconstitutional to do it. Now, those who will just ridicule this to no end, like they would like to, ask them this. Say that we join an international body. Sometimes they refer to it as the United Nations. And let's say that right now, I believe that 25% of the American people, sort of surprised me, didn't disappoint me, 25% of the American people think we ought to be out of the UN. I'm on that side.